Casey again.
Bless her heart.
Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are. Welcome to the Society of Tennessee Archivists final Archives Month webinar and part 2 of the LGBTQ archives in Tennessee. My name is Sarah Calise. I'm one of the members of STA's Education Committee. And hopefully we'll have some news for you very soon, like this week, about registering for the annual meeting, which is all virtual again this year. And it'll take place, it's one day on Friday, November 19th via Zoom. Very similar format. If you joined us last year, there'll be a program with links to each session, Zoom session. Not as many presentations this year, but excellent keynote speaker, Tennessee State Historian, Dr. Carol Van West. We're excited to have him. Yeah, so back to today. Today we will be talking about 3 more institutions. All of these happen to be Nashville based today. And they're going to discuss what they currently have in their collections as far as LGBTQ history holdings and perhaps where they would like to be in the future. First up, we have Patsy Mitchell from the Tennessee State Library and Archives, and I will let you take it away, Patsy.
Thank you so much. So let's see, there we go. Want to make sure I can advance. So my name is Patsy Mitchell. My official role here is as the electronic records archivist. So I usually do work with digital preservation and not as much with doing research and processing of our collections. So this was a very nice break away from that and to get to know our collections a little bit better. So if there's any oversight at all, that's entirely on me, but hopefully this is just a step in the right direction and an opportunity for us to do more research on this subject in the future. I wanted to make a quick note before I get started. These are the 2 collections that I think are our only self-identified queer collections. The reason why I'm not going to spend a ton of time on them is because the originals are not in our possession. This first one is the Dell Doors and Ogeny articles. We only have photocopies of the clippings. The originals are with the donor, and I think you can access the publication itself at Vanderbilt. And then we also have the Dare News Weekly on microfilm only, and I think those originals are at NTSU. So we do have those materials for informational value, but we do not have those originals. So I just want to give a quick breakdown of what I came across in my research. The main topics that seem to appear in our materials are gays in the military, same-sex marriage, gay adoption, HIV/AIDS, and then a category that I'm calling the right to exist. So that has more to do with, just the general right to be gay rather than a specific right or cause. And then the record types that seem to come up the most, really correspondence makes up the bulk of it, particularly constituent correspondence in our governor's papers. We also have some single-use printed materials like pamphlets and programs, and then of course, legislation and legal documents, and then a few policies and guidelines. And I say that they're materials. We don't really have what I would call LGBT collections so much as materials that are scattered throughout our other collections. So this first topic, gays in the military, it's mostly constituent correspondence, particularly to Senator Harlan Matthews, and then federal policies and procedures that would have been distributed by the Clinton administration regarding the don't ask, don't tell policy. So you can see this opinion ballot that was sent to Harlan Matthews from someone who supported lifting the ban on homosexuals in the military. And then you can see this piece of correspondence from the Reserve Officers Association of the United States. That's in the Judge Jerry Scott papers. Jerry Scott was a justice for the Tennessee Court of Criminal Appeals. He was also a brigadier general and a judge with the Air Force. So this is a piece of correspondence that he received from this professional association, essentially saying that they were against allowing homosexuals in the military. And there's some other materials that are referenced in that correspondence. I was not able to find it with that letter, but that doesn't mean that it isn't buried somewhere else in that collection. The other topic I want to talk about are queer families, and specifically related to marriage and adoption. Again, constituent correspondence makes up a lot of that. And subject files, which is really just any kind of document related to research on that subject, which you see a lot of in governor's papers. You can see this piece of correspondence to Governor Sundquist from the Christian Action Network that was essentially opposed to same-sex marriage. There's also some materials that came in from the Christian Action Network about the topic of homosexuality in schools and what teachers need to know about that topic. These images that I have on the slide are from the International Women's Year records. They would have been part of publications that the committee for this conference, which took place in Clarksville, I think in 1977, they collected all these different publications from different states that were related to women's rights, generally speaking. And one of the topics that came up were lesbians. And that was a topic that was discussed at, I think, the national conference, but also at the conference in Clarksville. So it's really kind of interesting because they had these different sessions on different topics, and the subject of lesbians was discussed in a session called Women Offenders. So they were lumped in with sex workers. And it's interesting if you want to do a deep dive into that collection and look at some of the evaluation forms that were collected related to the conference, where you can see how participants felt about the way that that session was put together. And probably the most prevalent topic in our materials is that of HIV/AIDS. Again, lots of constituent correspondence. We have materials related to AIDS awareness and state health policies and programs. This AIDS, What You Should Know, this is from a brochure that was part of the Department of Health and Environment Commissioner's Office subject files. This image on the right is from a greeting card that would have been sent in by a constituent to Senator Harlan Matthews, asking for him to take action on this issue. It was part of a campaign. I'm trying to remember now the name of it. I think it was Mothers' Voices, which was trying to get, the mothers of the nation to speak out on the issue of HIV/AIDS. Another really surprising collection, because as you have noticed, a lot of the things that I've been discussing have been related mostly to state records, governor's papers, political papers. But we do have a manuscript collection, the Links Incorporated Nashville chapter records. This is an African-American women's club, and they did a lot of work with local community organizations related to AIDS awareness. So you can see programs and pamphlets from different events that they held to raise awareness. Then this last topic, the right to exist. I consider this to be sort of the criminalization of queer people, which you would see a lot of. And for instance, our legislation, so our record group 60, that's records of the Tennessee General Assembly, bills, resolutions, going back to 1796. This is a massive collection, so I wasn't able to do as much detailed research as I would have liked, but certainly most of you are probably aware of recent legislation like the Don't Say Gay bill and legislation related to trans bathroom bills and those kinds of issues, which a lot of that recent legislation is actually available online in the legislative website's archive, which is capitol.tn.gov, if you want to take a look at those things for informational purposes. But I imagine that there's other legislation that is available in that record group. So that's definitely an area to look into in the future. And then also our Supreme Court records. I was able to find one Supreme Court case related to homosexual acts, and the terms that get used in those materials, it's tough because they are not referring to necessarily acts between consenting adults. Sometimes the term is used for adults that are committing acts on minors, or the term buggery is the term that would have been used at the time, and it also refers to acts of bestiality. So that's just something to be aware of if you're doing research on that subject. And then the formation of LGBTQ student groups. As you can see, I have this letter from the University of Tennessee discussing the registration of the UT Students for Gay Awareness, which I think was a really interesting subject. And there's always potential to find information in like our Attorney General's records related to court cases around student groups as well. So that's really all that I have. Like I said, this is just sort of a step in the right direction and hopefully serves as a foundation for a more thorough research guide down the road. These images on this last slide, they're not, what I would go so far as to call queer or LGBT, because I don't know these people and I don't know what their intentions were, but I thought that these images were interesting. The one on the far left and in the center, those are from the Nell Houston Brown papers, and all I can really say, appear to be people who are playing with gender norms regarding fashion. And then on the right, we have this photograph of the Sappho basketball team from the YMCA. Again, these young women may not have thought of Sappho as the queer icon that we consider her today. They might have just thought of her as this like symbol of sisterhood. But again, something interesting just to share with you all. And thank you so much, Sarah, for inviting TSLA to participate in this discussion.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to seeing the final research guide on that. And hopefully, I know you got some good movers and shakers at TSLA there. So hopefully y'all can get something going in terms of collecting more queer history. If you have any questions for Patsy, we're going to do questions at the end of everyone. So hold on to those. You can feel free to put them in the chat now if you want to. Next up, we will go to Kathy Smith from Vanderbilt University.
Thank you. Let's see what we got here. Start from the beginning. Slideshow. There we go. All right. Well, thank you very much for inviting us to come and talk a little bit. Vanderbilt has not actively in the past collected the materials of LGBTQI people. But as Sarah mentioned in her introduction, a lot of that is changing. And as we know, for many, many decades and or / centuries, it was not always easy to identify folks who would be identified as homosexual today. Folks use different words for it. Not a lot of people wanted to put things in writing. And so you'll see, especially in the collections of Vanderbilt here, that the earliest collection is more of a coded kind of thing. So actually the first collection I want to talk about is the George Marion ODonnell papers. And I've actually written something. George Marion ODonnell was born in January 21st, 1914, the Silver Home Plantation near Midnight, Mississippi. So that tells you a little bit about where he's coming from. The picture of the young man on the right of the photograph is George Marion ODonnell. The lady with the cig in her mouth, that's Caroline Tate, Alan Tate's wife. And then the next person is, I got it here, I keep forgetting it, Janice Biala. And then the guy leaning back is Ford Maddox Ford. And this is up at the Tate's home in Monteagle. So anyway, upon graduating from the Belzoni, Mississippi High School in 1932, Mr. George Marion ODonnell entered the Memphis State University. And then in 1934, he transferred to Vanderbilt University, where he was influenced by members of the well-known Southern literary group called the Fugitives, which included Alan Tate and Clarence Brooks and Andrew Lytle. He graduated with his Bachelor's of Arts in English in 1936 and then continued on graduate studies there, receiving his Master's of Arts in 1939. So during his career, O'Donnell was a literary critic. He wrote short stories and poems and appeared in over 30 scholarly journals and popular and literary magazines. One of his anthologies were included in New Yorker and Harper's Bazaar, and in the Agrarian Symposium in the 50s. He was particularly noted for his essays on William Faulkner and for his poetry. From approximately 1943 until his death, O'Donnell had as his companion Gordon Royce Smith, Jr., who was born in Dothan, Alabama in 1924. He studied at Alabama Polytechnic Institute, which I'm not sure, but it might be Auburn now. I can't remember. They met in 42, 43 when O'Donnell was on the faculty at the time. The young Mr. Smith served in the United States Navy during the war as a quartermaster, and then joined O'Donnell at Baton Rouge, where he continued his studies at LSU, but did not receive a degree. The letters, and they are pretty extensive, between O'Donnell and Royce are in the George Marion O'Donnell papers. And we were very lucky in the past 2 years. One of Smith's relatives contacted us and was interested and wanted to know more about the relationship between Smith and his partner, George Marion O'Donnell. And so they came down and did some really interesting research and was able to basically take away with them a nice history of the couple. The couple were together for many, many years until the death of O'Donnell in the late 50s, I believe. So many of you might have known Larry Romans. Larry Romans is the gentleman on the right hand in the red shirt, and his partner, Mike Morgan. So Larry served for many years as the head of government docs at Vanderbilt University. In fact, he was here from 1983 till his retirement in 2014. In 2012, ALA renamed their Stonewall Book Awards after Mike and Larry because of their existing support in their LGBTQI work with the ALA. And it is now called the Stonewall Book Award, the Mike Morgan and Larry Romans Children's and Young Adult Literature Award. As you might know, both Mike and Larry were avid collectors. Larry of everything, and his collection reflects that. One of the best things about Larry's collection, after we gave all of the CDs to the Blair Music Library and all of the regular books to the One collection out in California, was his collection of newsletters from early human rights campaign and early one-off sort of LGBTQ collections or activities here in Nashville from about the 70s on. And when Larry passed a couple of years ago, he and Mike had been married or had been together for 45 years. So I know Mike is still probably going through the house and finding little bits and pieces of stuff that Larry squirreled away. The other collection we have, and some of you may recognize the names, is the James R. Hawk and Robert Anthony Teal collection. This is a small collection, but they donated it back in 2016. And it basically documents the March on Washington in April of 1993. And so I just picked two images here that really represent some of the, as you can see, Tennesseans involved in the movement. And if you look closely, you might recognize some people. There are quite a few photographs in the collection, some t-shirts, lots of bumper stickers and pins and things of the like. I'd like to move now a little bit to some of our book and published materials collection. Paul Verlaine, if you remember from your studies, which I didn't, was a French poet associated with the symbolist movement or the symbolism movement, and something called the decadent movement. He was born in 1844 and died a relatively young man in 1896 at the age of 51. Here he is on the left, working on one of his masterpieces, I'm sure. And then on the right is Verlaine and his partner, Jean Nicholas Arthur Rimbaud, who was a younger man, had become enamored with Verlaine, and they pursued a relationship for many years, quite a violent one. At one point, Verlaine shot Rimbaud about twice, catching him once in the wrist. Rimbaud was a very productive poet in his early years, but by the age of 20 had ceased writing. They went on a tour, a grand tour, I guess you would say, of Europe. And basically, from what I've read, they tore up the place. So they fought hard and I guess loved hard. We have a collection which is called the Hervé Villers Paul Verlaine collection. Excuse me. It was purchased in 2016 and contains over 300 original publications by Verlaine, and then ensuing academic research on him, a lot of journals and magazines that contain his material contemporaneously, and some original Verlaine letters. Nothing by Rimbaud, but that is okay, I'm suspecting. So this is one of the publications. In it, it is Ode de la X, and it is actually a 1996 publication by this publishing house in France called Les Humanoids Associates. It's a Franco-American publishing house specializing in comics and graphic novels. It was founded in 1974 by comic artists Mobius and Jean-Pierre Donnet and Philippe Drouillet. Now, I am not by any means a French speaker, so if I am completely murderating these, please excuse me. The publishing house expanded, and it soon went into works of science fiction, but often featured adult content. And so we have quite a few things in the Verlaine collection that are by this publishing house. Verlaine was not shy about his love of the male form and wrote about it extensively. And we have a number of artist books which have taken the poetry and the writings that he did and let's just say articulated them in an imagery form. So this is just a one more vanilla way images from the collection. Then we go into the Everett Long collection. Everett Long was a civil rights activist and worked at a number of alt magazines throughout the South. He collected as he went on, and from his collection, we have hundreds of really cool early comic books, not early in the sense of like first Superman, but something like this, which was a 1976 feminist publication that celebrated lesbianism. And so this was by a woman named Roberta, who came up with this concept. She had written a number of other small pieces, but in 1976, self-published this herself. Her name was Roberta Gregory. And I thought this was just a great, Dynamite Damsels is the name of it. And on the back is We're Women and We're Beautiful, which I thought was great. Another part of the Everett Long collection is a series of gay comics. And the gay comics, this is from 1996, but they started in the 1980s. And the cover is on the left. And then the inside cover, which I just love so much, I had to copy it. This is the gay agenda. From out of the closet, deviant, twisted, and well-dressed, which I just thought was a great way of showing it. Has that sort of noir kind of look to it. But so the gay comics, this issue is from the Max, who was an artist. And then the main comic in this is about a young woman who was contemplating her sexuality. And so these were longer format comics, didn't always have a lot of short stories in them. This one I thought was really interesting. This is actually a comic about a woman who in Romania who was arrested and sentenced to jail for a number of years. Her name is Mariana Centener, and the comic is called Love. And it was published in 1996 by Amnesty International. So as you can tell, or 1998 by Amnesty International, as you can tell, Everett Long had a very interesting and sort of eclectic collecting style. We are blessed today with many issues of, I would say, alt magazines from the 60s and 70s that are not necessarily cataloged in OCLC. So that's a lot of fun for us. This one is another one from his collection. It's called Hands Off. And it was a series of artists, comic book artists that were put together they was written for the Washington Citizens for Fairness, also called Hands Off Washington. And it's 30-some comic book artists, and they're defending their right to be and to live life as they want. And this was also published in 1996. And once again, this is the back page of it on the right-hand side. And I thought that was a lot of fun too. So the Everett Long collection is much more of a out and proud collection, whereas you have to dig a little deeper with some of the materials that we have. And other folks had talked about it. Woo, that would be, I guess, it. So one of the things I didn't talk about were the materials in the university archives. Vanderbilt, as many large institutions of education do have some materials about early LGBT student groups, a lot of ally groups in the early 70s and 80s, where you could get together and sort of under the anonymity of being an ally, talk about LGBT things. So I would encourage folks to reach out to us and to hear more about what we have. Now, I'm just talking about the University Archives in Special Collections. My compatriot, Chris Ryland, who is here, also may have more materials in the History of Medicine collection. So I just want to put a plug in for him. Thanks.
Thank you, Kathy. Lots of excellent collections there. I was there digging around in Everett Long stuff a couple weeks ago. It's very overwhelming. There's like 30 plus boxes or something.
Oh yeah.
And last but certainly not least, we have Elizabeth Rivera from Lipscomb University.
Hey there, how is everyone? Hope you're doing really well. My name is Dr. Elizabeth Rivera. I'm the Associate Librarian and Archivist here at Lipscomb. And today I have the pleasure of sharing with you some information about the Archives After Dark Halston Gala that we had last Thursday night, because sharing the success of one of America's most iconic designers. The stories we tell matter, and whose stories are we sharing? What aspects of their stories are we including? Today, I have the honor of sharing with you the success of one of America's most iconic designers, Halston. Born Roy Halston Forrick, he grew up in Des Moines, Iowa, and began his career in New York City designing hats as a milliner at Lilly Dosh. And Lipscomb University is fortunate to house one of the largest collections of Halston original fashion sketches, photographs, patterns, and original garments. And 1 year ago, Chris Royer, a private fashion collector, historian, and Halstonette, sent me an email inquiring about our Halston collection. Although these types of requests are common, Chris Royer was not simply another researcher. As a former Halston model, known as a Halstonette, Chris knew the best of Halston personally and professionally. And while the mainstream media continues to overlook the immense value of Halston's work to advance American fashion, Chris's experience as a model uniquely positioned her to witness Halston's incredible devotion and intense discipline to his design work. Halston's clean lines accentuated the beauty and form of the woman wearing his designs. Well, during one of our phone conversations, Chris recalled, Halston was always a teacher. If you were willing to be disciplined by him, then you would have an amazing education. Chris's words resonated with me because as the archivist of a liberal arts university, I knew that our students had access to primary resources that could enrich their studies. And partnering with Chris opened up the door for new educational opportunities as we documented photographs, recorded aspects of Halston's story that had not yet been told. From Halston's original pieces, patterns, and photographs, I knew, as Chris knew, that through the use of our Halston collection, Lipscomb students would have an amazing education. So who was Halston, and what was his journey in the world of American fashion? In 1958, he became the first main designer for the custom milliner department of Bergdorf Goodman. Halston achieved international fame for creating the iconic pillbox hat that Mrs. Jacqueline Kennedy wore for her husband's presidential inauguration. Halston won his first Special Cody Award in 1962 for his millinery. This was a new award for the total look of fashion. In 1966, Halston created his first clothing collection for Bergdorf Goodman. Then in 1968, he established his own Halston Limited Company on 68th Street and Madison Avenue. And after his first collection in 1969, Halston won his second Cody Award. In 1971, he won his third Cody Award, and his influence was recognized internationally. His cashmere dresses, matte jersey dresses, and evening gowns were worn by the international fashion elite. Halston expanded his couture salon to include a full boutique on 813 Madison Avenue, New York City in 1972. And on May 23rd, Halston Originals, a complete ready-to-wear division, was opened up at 550 7th Avenue, New York City. Under this collection, he was able to create his iconic ultra suede shirtwaist dress. In October, Halston won his 4th Cody Award. And at the end of October 1973, Halston was acquired by Norton Simon. In 1973, Halston was part of 5 American designers for the unprecedented and highly successful modern gala known as the Grand Divertissement at Versailles. In fall 1974, Halston was elected to the Cody Hall of Fame. In 1975, Halston introduced a fragrance collection with Elsa Peretti for both men and women. And from 1976 to 1977, he signed numerous licensees for both men and women. In 1977, he designed the costumes for the hit show, The Act, starring Liza Minnelli. And then in January 1978, Halston moved the executive office, design room, workrooms, and made-to-order salons to his new showplace on the 21st floor of the Olympic Towers. In February, he launched his Halston cosmetic line for Max Factor, and later that year, he created the highly successful Halston sportswear line. In 1980, Halston signed a master license for women's clothing in Japan. And in the September of 1980, Halston made a round-the-world publicity tour, which included Japan, China, and Paris. And in 1983, he launched Halston 3, a collection designed for JCPenney. So Halston designed for all types of women. His designs were minimalist, yet refined and elegant. Halston's design philosophy was less is more. And many of his iconic designs are considered timeless. His cashmere dresses, matte jersey dresses, and evening gowns were worn by many, including Barbara Walters, Farrah Fawcett, Naomi Sims, Liza Minnelli, Lauren Bacall, Martha Graham, Lauren Hutton, Katharine Graham, Bianca Jagger, Hillary Mahoney, and many more. Chris Royer shared this quote as well. Halston's designs during the early 1970s and 80s represented some of the most iconic time designs in American fashion. Halston created a new sense of timeless style chic and glamour that was recognized by all. The fashion press and his global celebrity clientele embraced Halston's modern lifestyle, ranging from his must-have cashmere to ultra suede products and his fabulous evening wear. Here you can see Halston pictured with Saul Morano and Guido, 2 of the tailors working in the Olympic Towers. And here Halston is with his assistants in the design room at the Olympic Towers. This is one of our favorite pictures because you can see here, this is Naeem Khan on the far left, then Margaret Donahue, Halston, Chris Royer, and Akira at the Olympic Towers in this salon for a fitting. The Halston fragrance launch party in 1980 was in Paris, France, at Regine's nightclub. This was the last segment of the famous Halston global trip. He first went to Japan, China, and finally Paris. And pictured here, Halston's dancing with Regine, the owner of Regine's nightclub. Hero was another photographer at the time, and he was a dear friend of Halston, and he took many pictures for Halston. But this picture is from October 1980 at the Olympic Towers when Halston threw a birthday party for Hero. But pictured here is Halston on the left with Andy Warhol, and then Victor Hugo and writer Ben Brantley. On the far left is model Shirley Farrow standing next to Halston, Hero, the honoree, and Chris Royer. And then in this other photograph next to it is China Machado and Halston. So last Thursday night, we had a special event to celebrate this collection, but also to honor Halston. But more than just that, October is American Archives Month. And so the Archives After Dark Halston Gala was a celebration of this collaborative work of some of Lipscomb's best, specifically from the fashion design department. Charlotte Poling and Sissy Simmons. Charlotte and I began working together in 2019 to photograph every piece of Halston clothing in our collection. This foundational work led to a new collaborative partnership, culminating in the exhibit's festivities. Sissy Simmons reviewed many of the 54 Hollinger boxes in the Halston Pattern series to select potential patterns for her design studio class. The students constructed their own interpretations from the Halston's made-to-order patterns and designs. In fact, many of these students wore their interpretations of those signature pieces to the Archives After Dark Gala. So Sissy not only designed some of the pieces, Sissy not only created, looking at the designs, some of the pieces that we exhibited, and here she is pictured with one of her students, Lakeisha, but she also had the students to study the patterns, and here pictured is Emma. She looked at one of the patterns and interpreted and created the dress that she wore to the event. And then also here is Katie on the left. And she didn't look at one of the patterns. She looked at one of the sketches and then created this peach pantsuit that her dear friend ended up wearing that evening. And then here are some shots of the exhibit, and it's still up in our John C. Hutchison Gallery. And you can see the black sarong dress behind us, as well as the ivory silk organza with the black skirt. And then on the far right is the ivory silk skirt. And then it's paired with a hand beaded jacket and then tied with the O-bead belt. But those three pieces are Halston pieces from 1989 from the Japan collection. And that's significant because these were pieces that he shared and showcased and for the Japanese modern woman. And then on the wall, this young man is looking and viewing at the Halston original sketches that Joe Eula would have done. So Halston gave the ideas and Joe Eula then would sketch them. And many times he filled them in with beautiful watercolors. Pictured here is our new university president who came to our event, as well as two of my dear students, Paris Robertson and Jacob Jernigan. These two students worked with me. They led the event. They selected the Halston collection to be what we exhibited for our showcase during the month of October for American Archives Month, and they did an amazing job. They selected the jazz band, the Lipscomb University Jazz Band to play and to perform, as well as over 350 of our students came out to see the collection and to be a part. And here are two of the pieces that Sissy Simmons reviewed the patterns and then created to showcase the work of Halston. Thank you so much. It's an honor to be with you, and I hope that you really enjoyed seeing one of our greatest collections for the LGBTQI.
Yes, that was so cool. What a neat collection you have. I love fashion. There's like a historic fashion collection here at MTSU, and they have their own little archive, and it's just like so cool. I love all of that. And what a great event too. And I love the student involvement and how you got the art students and fashion students, everything. Wonderful. Oh, Margaret says they've seen the exhibit and it's great. All right, let's move on to our question portion if anyone has any questions. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you for having me, Sarah.
Oh, yes, of course. I don't think I missed any in the chat, but let me double check.
Elizabeth, I was interested, and I may have just missed this. How did you end up with the collection at Lipscomb?
You didn't miss this, but that collection has been at Lipscomb since, I believe, 2005. It came about because the former fashion design department chair, Kathy Bates, would travel every year to New York with her students. And so she would visit FIT, the Met, and other signature places, and just developed relationships with the people there. And because of her relationship, when Georgette Mosbacher was giving material to FIT couldn't take everything. And so they had a list of schools to recommend to Georgette, and Lipscomb's name was on that list. And so Georgette's mom lived in Nashville at the time, and she felt a connection to Nashville. And so she gifted it to a small liberal arts teaching school.
That's so cool.
What a fabulous collection to have here in Middle Tennessee, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Any questions? Don't be shy. Comments too. Suggestions for future documentation, future webinars, other things we can do with Tennessee's queer history. I will say we've covered 6 institutions through these 2 sessions, and I know there's a lot more institutions out there that have queer material or are starting to document it. So I think the next step for Society of Tennessee Archivists is to, we need to form some sort of statewide organization, perhaps, so that we all kind of know what each other's doing and can support each other in these efforts, and make those connections across communities. Yes, an Archives Alliance. Oh, where can we see last week's presentation? Yes, so I have the first presentation, which was Melissa Barker, on preserving your family history, and then the first part 1 of the LGBTQ archives, and then today's part 2. I'll put them on our YouTube channel. I was waiting till we were done with Archives Month, and then I'll put them all up hopefully next week or by the end of this week. And so look out on either Society of Tennessee Archivists social media, or if you were part of STA, I'll make sure that Amy Saunders sends out an email to everyone on the membership listserv as well. Yeah, so that will go on STA's YouTube channel very shortly.
Is anyone planning on going to the Queer South conference?
Yes, I am, for sure.
Are you presenting?
I'm not presenting. I decided I wanted to just hang back and observe and meet people and try to build connections that way, and kind of just see what everyone else is doing or throughout the South.
Very cool.
Donna Brackett might go, or I said that wrong, Donna. Braquet, right? French. I don't know any French.
We should get Bridget to let us know how to pronounce things.
All right, well, I think it looks like no one has any questions or comments, so I appreciate everyone for being here. Thank you to all of our presenters. If you have suggestions for further webinars, shoot me an email. I'll put it in the chat real quick, sarah.calise@mtsu.edu, and I'll be sure to discuss that with STA's Education Committee. Otherwise, have a great Tuesday, everyone. It's not Friday, as me and Kathy felt like it was. It is, in fact, Tuesday. Sorry to break that news to you. Have a good week and a happy Halloween.
That's right. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks.